The General Dynamics F-16 Fighting Falcon, today more commonly known as the F-16 Viper. It's the United States Air Force's main multi-role platform, performing both air-to-air and air-to-ground missions. It's the training plane, often used to let pilots get their hours in, and when it's not acting as the trainer, it's delivering freedom halfway across the world. Introduced in 1974, the F-16 is distinguishable by its bottom-mounted inlet, bubble canopy, and slightly downward slanted tail wings. It's appeared in several movies and TV shows, and at some point, we've all seen an F-16, even if we didn't know it was an F-16. Today, however, we're talking about a specific version of the F-16. A version of the F-16 that is widely known to be the F-16 we were robbed of. An F-16 that would have dominated the world and further established American aerial dominance. Today, we're talking about the F-16XL, a single-seat, cranked-arrow-wing F-16 that started life not as the F-16XL, but as the F-16 Scamp, or Supersonic Crude Maneuver Prototype. The Scamp was created around the same time that the F-16 was starting to see wide-scale production, so roughly 1976-ish. The Scamp was to be a demonstrator, a proof of concept and technology, much like the Abrams X, which was sadly taken away from us way too soon. However, unlike the Abrams X, Scamp did not end up a technology demonstrator, as you'll see in a minute. Scamp improved on everything the normal F-16 couldn't. Scamp had twice the speed, fuel, range, and triple the hardpoints. Where the normal F-16 had 9 hardpoints, Scamp had 27. Scamp was also twice as fuel efficient, and the F-16's fuel efficiency problem was a major problem for the F-16, specifically when using afterburner. See, unlike in movies, you can't just afterburn your way out of problems. As you'd probably guess, making fire come out of the back of your jet drains fuel faster than it takes Will Smith to get offended. With the addition of Scamp's new wing design, this fuel efficiency problem was fixed. All of this combined to make the F-16 Scamp the best F-16 ever made, and Scamp owes it all to its cranked arrow-wing design. But what is a cranked arrow-wing design? Well, a cranked arrow-wing design is a wing that kinda looks like a delta wing, or a giant triangle wing, but has this sort of swept wing bit you see here on the end. As with most delta wings, what this essentially is, this design allows the aircraft the ability to literally turn off gravity. And no, I'm not kidding. This so-called 5th-gen fighter is seen here performing a variation of the famous Pugachev's Cobra maneuver, known as the Sergei's Cobra spin. Take note of the wings on the 5th-gen fighter, and how they take up most of the aircraft. That gives said aircraft the ability to perform maneuvers like this. An F-16XL, with a cranked arrow-wing design, would be able to perform the same maneuver, only if the pilot is exceptionally drunk, as anyone but Hollywood or Russia would know that if a missile is coming at you and you do a Cobra, you've basically just committed suicide. Anyway, Scamp. In March of 1981, Scamp became the F-16XL to compete in the Enhanced Tactical Fighter program. Now, the Enhanced Tactical Fighter program was a program to replace the United States Air Force's aging fleet of F-111 aardvarks, an aircraft that carried the 60s and 70s trend of naval aviation aircraft having the ability to move their wings forward and backward. Also, much like the Tomcat, the F-111 also had 2 pilots, but unlike the Tomcat, they were positioned behind and in front of one another. Instead, General Dynamics said fuck it and decided to make the 2 pilots sit right next to each other, side by side, as you can see now. To replace the aardvark, the Air Force needed an aircraft that could get behind enemy lines, deliver freedom, and come back home without any support from other aircraft. The F-16XL was entered into the program as a contender for the Air Force's contract. But you can't have a 2-plane competition without another contender. Enter the McDonnell Douglas F-15E Strike Eagle. Built from the world's best air superiority fighter with the highest kill-to-death ratio ever, 104 kills to 0 deaths, the F-15E, unlike the XL, saw only slight modifications, as McDonnell Douglas, instead of redesigning the F-15, decided to take an F-15D, shown here, a combat training version of the F-15 Eagle, and make the F-15E Strike Eagle out of it. Right out of the gate, this new F-15E Strike Eagle, being essentially an F-15D on steroids, had 15 hardpoints, which is 12 less hardpoints than an F-16XL, I might add. The F-15E had 2 engines that propelled it to Mach 2.5, a better radar, a service ceiling of 60,000 feet, and was more reliable than an F-16 in an air-to-air engagement. The F-16XL, on the other hand, had a service ceiling of 50,000 feet, can only go Mach 1.8, and had 1 engine. It also had a worse radar than the F-15E. What the XL did do better was maneuverability and range. Being a cranked arrow-wing aircraft, the F-16XL had the maneuverability advantage over the F-15E's modified cropped delta wing. And while the F-15E required 3 external fuel tanks to get it to a range of 2,800 miles, the F-16XL didn't. I'll also mention the fact that the XL probably had a smaller RCS, or radar cross-section, basically the aircraft stealth stat, than the F-15E. I say probably because we don't actually know the XL's RCS, but we do know the F-15E's and the F-16's RCS. The F-15E had an RCS of 25 meters squared, and the F-16 had an RCS of 5 meters squared. We can assume that since the XL's wing shape was larger than that of the F-16, that its RCS was higher than the F-16's. So its RCS is more than 5 meters squared. But since we know that the XL was smaller than the F-15E, we can also assume that its RCS was smaller than the F-15E. So smaller than 25 meters squared. So in the end, the F-16XL has a better chance at avoiding radar than the F-15E. That is, radar from World War II, because they're not stealth jets. They're gonna be seen. The F-16XL and the F-15E were very similar, but in the end, the F-15E Strike Eagle ended up winning the contract. But did the Air Force make the right decision? Did politics get in the way? Or did the Air Force simply choose the aircraft whose company paid them the most money, say some bullshit about having little money, and then never talk about it again? People have been debating the topic of whether or not the XL should have won the ETF contract or not for years. After all, why would the best F-16 ever made lose to a drugged F-15D? Well, let's talk about converting an F-15D to an F-15E. As I've stated before, the F-15E is simply a systems upgrade package for the F-15D. This means it's far less expensive to convert an F-15D to an F-15E, whereas an F-16XL would require a normal F-16's wings to be ripped off and new wings with completely new systems in them be added back onto the F-16. This would cost way more than an F-15E. Also, as I've mentioned before, the F-15E was built off the F-15, a reliable air-to-air platform. If the F-15E had to get in a fight with an enemy aircraft, the Air Force could trust that the F-15E had a high chance of survival, whereas the F-16XL is a wild card. And speaking of air-to-air combat, the F-15E would perform better than the XL in a BVR, or Beyond Visual Range fight, due to the F-15E's vastly superior radar. And in a BVR fight, where the enemy aircraft is hundreds of miles away, you don't need the XL's maneuverability. The F-15E could also match the XL's range with the addition of external drop tanks. This basically eliminates the range and fuel advantage the XL had over the F-15E. And as far as speed is concerned, the F-15E had 2 engines and could go Mach 2.5, which is way faster than the XL's measly Mach 1.8. When you're fighting high G turn rate missiles, speed matters. If you got a missile coming at you, would you rather have a jet that could go Mach 2.5 or a jet that could go Mach 1.8? Let's also not forget that the F-15E had a 10,000 feet service advantage ceiling over the XL. I mean, do I need to remind you what happens when you don't have a high enough service ceiling? With the F-15E winning the competition and securing the United States Air Force's contract, what happened to the XL? Well, the 2 prototypes were flown to Edwards Air Force Base, where they were placed in storage until 1998. when NASA would acquire them for testing. Various experiments were performed on the aircraft, such as sonic boom tests and engine tests, including this one test where they modified the wing to perform a test on airflow during supersonic flight. Eventually, though, the two aircraft were sent to the Air Force Flight Center Museum, where they are today. This all begs to ask the question, should the F-16XL have won the Air Force's contract? Yes, but no. The F-16XL was a promising upgrade from the F-16. It fixed many of its problems, but the competition was simply cheaper and offered the same results. In the long run, creating what is basically a new aircraft was not the best way to fix the F-16's problems, and this shows in the F-15E. When you replace half of an aircraft's airframe, its maintenance cost goes up. The F-15E, being an F-15D, means it costs less to maintain, as I've already said before, and I don't doubt this issue was brought up at the Pentagon. And the F-16XL, being a redesign, means you'll have to retrain F-16 pilots on how to fly an aircraft with the XL's new wing, where an F-15D pilot needs to simply know how to drop a guided bomb or use a laser designator. What the Air Force should have considered was the fact that the XL would have been better suited as a multi-role fighter. Using the XL as a ground attack fighter wastes its potential as an excellent dogfighter. And with a better radar equipped, the XL would have been greatly suited for BVR engagements. This, in addition to the possibility of a new engine, would make the XL an advanced, semi-cheap fighter that could be trusted to get the job done. By making the XL an air superiority fighter, the Air Force wouldn't need to worry about its F-16s getting into a merge with the king of 4th-gen maneuverability, the Russian Su-27 flanker, and other Russian aircraft, which, despite what the Russo-Ukrainian war tells you, is not a bad fighter. Merely what happens when you brainwash your pilots, let them fly an aircraft for 10 hours every year, only for air shows, I might add, and of course, give them a bowl of ramen noodles, a 40-year-old outdated fighter jet with 8 of its maintenance panels nowhere to be seen, and then send it into battle to fight modern American-made, fresh off the factory floor missiles. The speed and maneuverability of this thing are simply too good to pass up, and instead, the Air Force decided to scrap it and let the space agency, who couldn't go back to the moon, fly it around for a couple years. It's like Tesla made a new electric car that can travel the entire continental United States without recharging once, and then Tesla decides to simply let it rust in storage for the next 50 years. The F-16XL was an amazing aircraft that had so much potential that was simply beaten out by a far cheaper plane. Its developments and tests, however, were not performed in vain. The tests performed on the two prototypes led to the creation of the F-22 Raptor and other various aircraft. However, the museum may not be the end of the line for the F-16XL. The United States Air Force is currently considering looking into replacing its aging fleet of F-16s, as updating an aircraft and giving it modern systems can only get so expensive and go so far. The idea of a concept fighter named the F-36 King Snake has been floating around for several months now, but given the fact that the United States Air Force wants to replace the Viper, I actually doubt it will be considered by the United States Air Force, or any defense company for that matter. Keep in mind that whilst it does have a new wing shape, it is ultimately and fundamentally an F-16. Hi everyone, this is my first video, and I know the audio is pretty bad. I am working on the situation, but this is what videos are going to be like from now on and forever. This is how they will be formatted, and this is the general topic they will be in. But until next time, Spectre signing off.